All right, I think I'm finally going to start. Here we go. I've got everything loaded up here. All right. Thank you for joining, whoever's actually here, if you're watching this later. What I'm going to be doing, or what I'm planning on doing, is just going through some simple API work. So I've found, or no, actually, I haven't found it. Some of my coworkers have pointed out that there's this COVID-19 API, and you can grab information based on the individual states. It updates every day, as far as I know, and just with the information that of the number of people who have been tested, if they're positive, if they're negative. So I just kind of want to use this as a fun project to do work on my development skills, work on my admin skills. It's going to be I have a couple things that I want to do in line, so definitely creating an object which is going to track the individual states, doing the web service call out, probably going to do a wrapper class to showcase the differences between wrappers and deserializing with untyped. What else can I do with this? Probably do some sort of refresh or scheduled process with this, since we can update this every day. And I'm just going to start from the beginning. So how my thought process kind of goes with this type of project. I'll try to run through it as best as I can. Definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. I should be looking in the chat. And yeah, we're just going to roll with this. So for today, what we want to get done is just creating the objects that's going to hold the information from this API. I'll take you guys through the API and see, I haven't looked at it too heavily. So I'm just going through like the planning phase of things, and then hopefully we'll be able to actually call the web service today, depending on how much time I have. Calling the web service today and creating the records, maybe even updating the records if they don't exist yet. So that's what I have going on right now. I think that's it. I'm Walters954. Let's get into this. So there is Postman and, or at least as far as I know, there's probably a bunch of other COVID-19 APIs out there. But this is one that I found. It is in Postman, which makes it a lot easier to use. If you don't know what Postman is, it's a web service mocking and calling out tool that a lot of developers use to get information and test their APIs and do a lot of their web service calls. So I already have it downloaded. If you're trying to follow along, take the pause now and download Postman. I'm going to be using it at least a little bit to get started with. And what I'm going to be using this for is to see, what comes out of these APIs. So if we call this specific URL, let's see what happens if we actually call it in the browser. We should see a ton of information out here. So if you can kind of guess what's going on, we have the state, AK, that might be Arkansas, and it looks like 300 people are positive, and this is a lot of information that is not very easy to be human readable. So what Postman does, if you input this API or that URL into Postman, let's just call this a request. COVID states, gotta name it. What else does it need? Let's do that. All right, we need to save it. And if we paste this in here and hit send, bam, it's going to format all of the information that was sent through. The information is being sent in JSON. We can kind of see, I know that based on the structure, and Postman even tells us what it is. I think we'll be able to flip these. Yeah, it's not going to know how to read these. So it does flip it already beautified or put it in a nice and neat format for us to be a little bit easier to read as the information is coming through. So what I'm going to do now that I can read this a little bit better is try to understand the values that are coming through in the process and in this web service call out, and try to mock this up in a sort of Salesforce object. So what my Salesforce object is going to look like, it'll probably be called state or something like that. COVID state, I don't know. But there's going to be a name for the state, the number of a number field for the number of positive, a score. I don't fully understand that. We may have to look through if there's any documentation to see what all the individual items mean. You know, hospitalizations. We just want to track all this stuff. What we want to do is move it out of this API that isn't very easy to read into Salesforce, so then we can use all of our Salesforce magic on it. But this gives us a really good starting point into what we're going to use to convert our you know, create our object and map our object out of. So this is what it looked like before. Let's delete that. What we also have in here, and this is just some nice features that go with Postman, we can actually say run in Postman, and instead of us, you know, grabbing all of these different URLs and APIs that we can call, it will put it inside of Postman for us, inside of a collection. So we can see here, these are all of the different callouts that we can do. Let me close that one. So instead of, you know, copying pasting each of the individual ones that are inside of here to say like what is daily changes or any of these, we now have it easily inside of Postman, and it's just a collection is what they did. So we can start to explore all of the APIs in this a little bit easier, instead of, you know, it being a little bit disjointed and all over the place. But now if we, you know, want to look at states daily, we can easily click on that. It's waiting to format. And then this states daily, it looks like it's as of maybe updated today or something like that. And this could be something like a child object, or, you know, we could track the change over time daily with this information in here. Maybe for a later type of video, but, you know, it's just something we can think about. Same thing with countries. Let's click on that and see what we get out of here. Not much. Don't really see anything here, but overall, we're going to be sticking with the states, at least for right now. Pulling all of these values and definitely entering them into Salesforce. So let's get started with that. And what I'm going to be doing is, first, let's start by mapping a good portion of the most important fields that we have in here into a new object. So we know we're going to need state, positive. We don't really know what these do right now, so we'll leave them. We'll leave them out of the picture. We do want to capture deaths just to see what's going on, hospitalizations, the total numbers and things like that. So let's start creating our object, and I'll start plugging in some of these fields that are going to be important to us. So I'm going to put this on the other screen so that I can move them over, and then let's get started with our actual app. I am just using a playground org that I spun up very quickly. So if you're, you know, it's not like a developer org or anything like that. We may run into some issues on storage limits, but at least for now, we're just having fun, and you know, we're just making an object. So the first thing I'm going to start out with is I'm just going to create an app to hold all of this COVID project type of stuff that I want to create. So instead of having it in my sales or any you know, marketing app, I'm going to create a specific COVID. I think it's in all caps too. COVID-19 app, so that I can store all of this stuff, all things COVID. So I can store all of this stuff in here, and it doesn't get cluttered up with anything else. Let's see here. So we do want standard navigation, and we'll keep the same layouts and stuff for desktop and phone. Nothing on the utility bar for right now. And we actually don't have any apps that we built or tabs that we want to have just yet. But I'll go ahead and add the home. We may work on some dashboards later on so that we can, you know, see the information a little bit better. Since this is a playground org and nobody else is going to be in it, I'm going to add system admin in there. Cool, so we have now created our COVID app Then I'm going to create my first object, and I'm going to base my object on a lot of the values that is coming through in that API. So we need to pick a name for this object. When I look at the Postman JSON response here, it doesn't really give me any ideas of what to call it. Since this is a playground org, let's just call it COVID states or something like that. COVID states. And I'm just going to drop this in here. The name, let's see. So for the name, we're going to have this actually be the name of the state. We don't need to do an auto number or anything like that. So that's what I'm thinking through there, if we should change this into an auto number. We do, all of these state values will be pretty unique. So it's fine to just, put the name in it. And for the name, we're going to put the actual name of the state. These are fine. Let's put on field tracking history, reports. We don't need any activities for right now. And let's do all of this. Let's allow a search if we want to find some. And then let's go to the new tab wizard after this is done. All right, let's pick something here. Do they have like a bug or something? That'd be a pretty good one. This is the hardest part about Salesforce, is picking a really good icon for your tab. Ooh, insect, perfect. Here we go. All right, now let's turn this on for everybody. If you're in production and doing stuff like this, make sure to set it up for the right people, but I'm just playing around for right now. Cool, so now let's start creating some fields that we are going to have in here. So can I do this? I probably won't do it side by side, but I'm gonna try to stick with some of the most important ones. Look at another one to see if there's any good values in here. So we already have state. That's gonna be the name of the actual record. We'll probably take positive, commercial score. I don't know what grade is. Maybe we'll try to look up the documentation, see if there's any documentation in here to say what these actually mean. I'll do that offline, but there's most likely some documentation that says what all of these values actually mean in the end. But we'll take a lot of the numbers, so like hospitalizations, negatives, and I'll just start adding those in as number fields inside of our new Salesforce object that will be storing these values. So the first one we have on my list here is positive. Number field. All right, so this is going to be length 18.0. I'm assuming you can't have a half positive COVID person. It's either you're infected or you're not infected, as far as I know. Adding it to the field layout, and then on to the next one. This one looks like I'm going through the list on my other screen. Let's do negative, why not? Easy. Same deal with that one. Can't really have half negative people. You'll see me nexting through everything. I'm just adding it to the layout and making sure that the default people have access to it. Because, once again, we're in our playground org. If you're in production, definitely check who needs to see what, and make sure those values are updated based on profiles and things like that. Next up, we're going to take hospitalized currently, another number. And I assume that a lot of these are going to be number fields. Let's clear that up. Looking for the, oh wow, they have on ventilator currently. It's a pretty interesting one there. Number field again. And with these being number fields, it's going to make it a lot easier when we start writing the code to call this web service or call their API. Oh, should I hit save and next? Save me an extra click. The next one we're adding here is recovered. We do have some timestamps, so we've got last updated ETA and check timestamp. I'm probably going to add those in later, just because if we look at the format of these, they're a little bit special, and I want to at least get through creating the object and pulling some sort of data in this, at least this video. These are most likely going to be, since they're not formatted in a very easy to read way, it's going to be, oh, actually we have some down here. Still, the same thing still applies. I'm not going to mess with them right now. I'll probably do a follow-up stream just going over how to deal with date values when we're deserializing them. All right, let's go with some more numbers here. The one nobody wants to see, we have deaths. Go ahead and take that, and another number here. This one is total test results. Getting a message. They have one here that's pause neg. It's probably here. I'll show you guys what that looks like. They have a value here that's pause neg, which is probably the subtraction between the positive and negatives, most likely. Is that all? Oh no, that's the total number. I don't know. We'll leave that one out. Yeah, it looks like the total number. We can easily make a formula inside of Salesforce and you know, do that type of value there. So it's not a big deal for us. What else do we have? I think that's it. And there's a quick note that I want everybody to see. I'm bringing this back up again. They say to stop using the total field and use the total test results. So even though they are the same, maybe for some values somewhere they're not the same in some of the other states. So let's take a look at the fields that we've created. These all look good. Let me refresh this page and let's just create one of these, you know, by hand and see what that looks like. So I'm going to go to my new app that I created, COVID-19 app, and there should be a tab on there called COVID states. So we'll eventually work on updating this dashboard to show something else. All right, and then let's create one of these by hand and show you, you know, what it would be like creating it by hand if we're just taking all of these values and inputting it in, and then we'll start to put these in without, you know, work on the API to put these in. So this is positive 1,000. Oh, let me actually start with Arkansas. This is the first one. 300 positive. 8,435 negative. Hospitalized currently, or is that currently? So there's hospitalized currently and cumulative. The value that this should probably be is cumulative. We'll go back and change that one. On ventilators, they've got null, so we're going to leave it blank. Covered 10, deaths 9, total test results 8. 8735. All right, so that looks good, and let's hit save on this. So this is what it would be like if we created this manually, if this was somebody's job to literally go run this API and there was no integration. They would come in here and update these numbers every day. That's pretty time consuming. Since it is a call out that we can call. We can use code to process this information automatically and do it daily, or do it whenever we want. It doesn't even have to be daily. Do it 1,000,000 times a second if they technically allow us to. So now let's get into the process behind using the API to actually get this done, because we not only, it's going to take forever to enter in Arkansas, Alabama, and all of the rest of the 50 states in one by one. So we want to do this programmatically, and it allows us to do this programmatically. Let's just fixing up my list view here. So we can see everything a little bit more. We have Arkansas in here, if this is even is Arkansas. But all right, so that's going to be it for part 1 of this. It didn't take long to set up this actual object and create this information that's going to be holding all of the values that we need in here. Now let's get into the code aspect of it, which is actually building the Salesforce callout that will access this API and grab all the information from it. So to do this, I'm going to start out really simple, I'll say. And I'll probably, what I should do is follow the same format of the Trailhead callouts. I think there's a Trailhead callouts module, just to show some similarities between it. Let me see if they have it here. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to do this in the developer console. One quick trick that somebody from the Discord taught me is that you can actually turn Chrome tabs. Ooh, this one froze. Chrome, your developer console that's in the Chrome tab into an actual Chrome tab. So that one works out really nicely. Okay, and let's start out by creating a new Apex class. Let's call this, another one of the hardest parts of Apex. Let's call this COVID callout. And let's do callouts just in case we add multiple to this. Cool, so now we have our class, and what we're going to be doing here is, let's say that what we're going to be doing here is doing the actual HTTP request out to get the information. So let's start with that. So we're going to need a method, and we'll have it return the HTTP response. You know what? Since I'm not in my Visual Studio, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to kind of copy what they have here, and I'm going to say make states callout. And let me make sure that in my Postman states current, I want to kind of name them the same. There we go. So I'm going to call this make states, well, it's called make current, states current callout. So I don't need any arguments in here. We could have some, I won't go into the parameters that we could have for this. Oh, so we got a question. We got a couple questions. So SoCal Rider, what's up, bro? How's it going? And then we have one in here. Looks like we missed on that separate tab. Cool if you could explain. Okay, so I think you're talking about, let me just return null so I can save this. If the U sits in here. Come on. So I'm saving this so I don't HTTP response save. What else did I spell wrong? Unexpected static. I really just want to go to the other side. because there's no way my class name's too wrong. So I spelled public wrong. What's wrong with me? There we go. Cool. So what I was saying about the Chrome tabs is when you open up the developer console, normally it's by itself. It's just hanging out here. We can't add it on to your regular tabs. If you right click and hit show as tab, it's going to create this as like a regular tab inside of Chrome. So then we can move it up here and add it to whatever the other tabs that we want to look at. So that's something really neat that I learned recently. All right, what did we call this? It's probably COVID something. A bunch of standard stuff here. COVID callouts, and then let's put this back HTTP response, and we are going to return null for right now. At the end of this, we're probably going to return the entire response so that if anything else calls this, we can use the information that we have in here. All right, so if we want to kind of look at, let's bring up the docs so we can see how, so I can kind of slow it down so I don't just go ahead and like blaze through and code up the request that we're looking at. So I'm going to type in Salesforce HTTP request. Why not? See what some of the documentation has to show us, and then I'll also bring up the Trailhead module, which I will be following pretty closely. So if you look at the request class, it's for the most part straightforward. We're going to create a request object, set the endpoint, and say the type of method that this is. If there is some sort of authentication, we could put in our password and set additional headers. I will have to see if we need to set those headers or not. And then at the end of this, we'll need to parse, or we'll get a response, and we'll need to parse that information that comes back. Same thing in the Trailhead module. So this is Apex integration services, Apex REST callouts. So in here, we're going to be following the same type of process. If the response is, we'll actually start doing some more parsing of the response. So getting the status codes. And if everything's good, we may even go into updating these values. Cool. So let me bring this back down. And this goes to show you like how good the Trailhead modules are, because you can kind of, I won't say that this is production ready or anything, but it's a good starting point for you to understand how to do callouts and stuff like that. All right, so let's go ahead and do our HTTP request. All right, so we need to create a HTTP object. And then so this is the actual method or object that's going to be sending the information out. After this, let's build a request that we're going to be sending out. So to do that, and we'll call this, let's just call this request. This is like a standard one that for the most part everybody uses. Let's do new, close that off. And then now that we have this request object, we can go ahead and use it and start setting some of the endpoints and things like that. So we're going to do set endpoint. We can see, if I pull that back up, we can see all of the methods that we have in here that we can do. So a lot of them, we're going to be setting the endpoint. I'm going to leave this blank for right now. That's going to be our COVID API endpoint that we're going to use. And then let's do request.set method. This one is most likely going to be get. So there is a bit of time that we can spend understanding the different HTTP REST method callout methods that you can use. It's not going to happen in this video, but just understand that get is for us getting information or requesting information from another system. And what else do we have in here? So let's actually set our endpoint. The endpoint that we are going to be using is the same one that we did in our state. So we can kind of see all of the same stuff here in Postman, where this is the endpoint that we're using. We're using a get request, and here's a lot of the other ones that are out there. And then that's going to send out, we're going to call HTTP to send out that message to the to their server to send back this information to us. Okay, so continuing on, now we need to actually send out that message. So we're going to be using HTTP, this object that we're creating here, to actually send that method out. Let's do send. And then what we're going to pass into this is just the request that we have. So we're going to say, you know, hey, go out and get this information, send the message to the other system, and see what we get. But we need to, a specific type of object comes back from this sending it out and this request, and it is called an HTTP response. And let's call this response. Did I spell response right? Response. There you go. And then since we have our response value, we can actually update this. I did not spell it right. Why can't I spell? Yeah, no. That's right. Save. Oh, I'm done. I'm missing an equal sign. I'm over here thinking that it is, this is why people abbreviate these in res and req. Anyways, let's move on. So we have our response object, and let's just see what we get inside of this. So I'm going to do a little trick before I even move any further. You know, as every good developer does in their amazing wisdom and their debugging tools, let's go ahead and debug our response. And I'm going to do another one to debug, or you know what, let's debug this line first and see what we get. And then I'll show you another way to debug it and read it a little bit easier. So how do we actually call this? You know, we have our method. It looks like we're going out to that COVID API to get the information from it. We are sending that out, and we should get something back. How do we call this as we're going through our testing? Well, one way is to, especially while you're doing your tests, is to do this through the Apex Anonymous. And what you're going to do is just call this method that you have here. So we have COVID callout, that's what it's called. And then we are going to do make states current callout. I'm going to make sure my debug logs are on so that I can see some of this information. Unauthorized endpoint. So this is something that's going to come up, and it's basically saying, hey, nobody's said that this is allowed to be reached out to, and it's another security measure that makes sure that malicious code isn't running inside of your organization, because you have to do an additional step to authorize them as a remote site or another place that we can access. So let's go ahead and go to remote sites in the setup and add this one in, basically allowing this particular site to be used. So I'm adding in the URL COVID states. Let's save that. And I think they can only be, it's an API name, so we need an underscore in here. Perfect. And let's try that again. So something happened. It went through. We're looking through our logs. Are we seeing anything weird coming back? We may or may not, so let's go ahead and hit debug only. And we can see that, hey, we're getting status code OK and status code 200 and the status of OK, meaning that everything went well. There are other status codes that there's actually a ton of other status codes. So like I think 500 means server error, and there's a bunch of other ones. There's definitely some. It's all documented if you want to see the REST status codes, but this means that it's working. So that's really good. We're at least hitting their server, but what we didn't see is any data on there. It's like, where's my actual data that we have? So to get that, let's do another system.debug response. And since that is an object, we can call some methods that are in there, and we're going to call getBody. And the body of any response message is, for the most part, the meat of what you're looking for. If we look at Postman, we see here in the body, there's all of the information that we are looking for and got returned in JSON. If we look at the headers, there's some other information, but it's not really what we care about. Nothing got set in the cookies. So let's save this and run it one more time. Gonna do it really quick, execute last. It should run the same method. Open up the logs again. Gonna hit debug only. And there, would you look at that, we're starting to see a bunch of mumbo jumbo that look like what we had when we first looked at this through the URL. So we are actually getting that information inside of Salesforce. So, step one complete, we've done it. But now we need to use all this information, which is in a really big string, is what it gets returned as, and convert it into something that we can kind of understand and use inside of Salesforce. So next up, let's start to actually get or manipulate this body information so that it's in a form that we can understand. So how to do that is by using a JSON method, or since this is JSON data, we can deserialize it, which is basically transforming it into a structure that we can use in code. Because we could go here and say, hey, put all of that string into some object, but that won't be very meaningful for us. We need to actually get the information out of these values. We need to get the information out of these values so that we can put them in our individual objects. All right, so the way we do that is by using a specific JSON method called deserializing it. So we're basically converting it from its very compact form into a form that we can use for other objects. For this deserialization, we're going to create a map objects. We're going to call this results. And let's start out with the deserialization. So JSON.deserialize, and you can see that there's a bunch of different deserialization methods that we can use. We're going to use untyped for now. We will slowly move on to most likely the regular deserialization straight to an object, but let's do untyped for now so we can show you what that looks like. And then we saw here for the parameter, it takes a JSON string. So let's actually take our response body, which is JSON, and put it in there. So what that's going to do is create a map of string objects that we can then start to use. So we're seeing that we're getting an error here, and that's because even though we're deserializing this untyped, we need to actually cast this to the same type since it's untyped. We need to cast this to a string of map objects. Let's hit save on that one. And then more stuff that we can do here, system.debug, and then let's hit results. More debugging. Let's do it. And then once again, I'm going to execute this, and then let's just see what we get. So runtime error. So this is where the Trailhead module is going to start falling apart on us, and where we're going to start having to do some actual debugging. So it looks like the Postman, or the message that's being sent, it's in these curly braces over here, which means these really big curly braces, which means this is an array. So since it's an array, we need to not convert it into a string of maps, so we need to convert it into a string. We need to convert this into a list of. We'll probably do a list of objects first, just to see what we get. Save that. Okay, that looked like it worked. Let's try to execute. Execution worked, and then so it looks like we're getting some stuff in here. If we since this is a list of objects, if we're allowed to loop over it. Let's call this object obj, and then let's loop over our results, and then let's put system.debug. Let's just call this obj. And what I'm expecting to see here, results with an S. What I'm expecting to see here is we're basically going through these individual lines to that exist inside of our list. We're going to go through every single one. Every single one of these is a state. So let's run this. Go debug. And boom, we're looking at a bunch of individualized information. Somewhere in here, it's going to, well, it gets truncated, but somewhere in here, it's going to say that it's a state, but we can't see it. But we see that a bunch of this information is different, and that's because there's probably going to be 50 lines in here. Each of these lines are individualized states. So we're getting really close to pulling the correct information out of the message that got sent. Let's go ahead and we're going to do something very similar to what we were going to do originally, and basically allow us to pull out information from the results even further. So what we're going to do here is create another MapString Object. It should hopefully work this time. Let's call this state, and let's use our object, and we're actually going to start by deserializing it again. Untyped. Can we just cast this? Let's try just casting it. So I'm just going to try to convert this object to a map of object strings. Yeah, let's do that instead of going the other route. So I'm taking the individualized object that we're bringing in here, and we're casting it to a map of string objects. Well, most likely, let's see if we can do this. Execute. Well, got no runtime errors, so that's looking good. And then let's, since we're able to cast it there, this basically converts it into key value pairs that we're seeing here. So we should be able to call this KeyState and spit out whatever the value is. So let's call state.get. And it was, I forgot the key already, I think it's a state. And let's just print it out again. And we'll eventually clean up all of these print lines. I just kind of want to run through a lot of this visually for everyone, so that they can understand, all of the moving pieces that's coming through here. So I'm going to execute again. No runtime errors, and would you look at that? We're starting to see some state values come in. This is perfect. This is perfect. So now that we're able to get values out, we're able to get values out of this JSON message, we can now use this to insert basically whatever. We can use this however we want now. We can insert values, and it's what we're going to do. We're going to insert values into our COVID-19 state table based on the fields that we have in here. Okay, so some best practice housekeeping that we need to do. Let's take care of these. And we know that, did I do it too far? Okay. We know that we don't want to do updatings or updates inside of a for loop. So, or any type of DML processes inside of a for loop. So I'm going to go ahead and create a list of COVID, dang it, I forgot the name already, COVID states. I'm hoping that's what it's called. And I'm going to call this upsert states. This new list of COVID. I think there's an S in there. We're going to have to double check if the compiler screams at us. So we're going to create a new object there. And what we're using that for, dang it, what is this called? I should have just named it something simple. No, I got it right. Oh, I forgot my underscores. What's wrong with me? Hello, Mahesh. Hiya, how's it going? Okay, so we now have our list of things that are our list of states that we're going to, I'm going to use an upsert because I know later on we're going to be inserting and updating some of these. So upsert states, I'm going to go ahead and just put the update in there for it already. Now that we can grab our values out of the process, out of the get method that we're using, we can start to create objects inside of Salesforce. So what I'm going to do is create a temporary state equal to a new state, and we're gonna equal this to a new state. And then after this, what I want to do is start setting some of the state values. So we know that the name is going to be equal to state.getStateName. I'm going to bring up Postman here in a second. Some other things is we're going to take positive. We know we have a value for that in Salesforce when we look at this, positive. So we're going to set that value as well. And already we're starting to run into some errors with illegal assignments. And basically what this means is that when we do this conversion here, we're doing we're looking at state as a key value pair. So the key is a string, but the value is an actual object. So we need to do another cast to a string value of the state. And that's going to convert whatever object or whatever, it's actually an object, whatever object is inside that value into a string, and then we're going to put that inside of this name here. This is the name of our state. And we're going to do some more, but before we forget, let's add this to our list equals, what am I talking about? We're going to add this to our list. I said that before. So we're going to add that to our list. So when we finally update, it will have all the values that we have in here. Now, if we run this, let's do that. Let's run it. So just for everybody to know, when I refresh our COVID states, we are currently looking at only 8K. I'm assuming it's Arkansas. Wow, I'll really need to figure that out. And then if I run this right now, what this is going to do, just like a recap for everyone, we're going to do a HTTP request to this COVID tracking API. And then in the response, we're parsing the response and getting some of the values out of that API information. Right now, we're storing the state from this key state, and we're putting it into, so here's the key state, and we're putting it into a temp state or a state value. And we're collecting all of those individual states because we're bulkifying our code, and we're going to insert those into the actual COVID-19 or actual custom object. So right now I haven't set up any additional fields for this, like positive and the number fields, but let's execute this and see what happens. So that looked like it ran pretty quickly. We have all of our state names here in the debugger, and what I'm expecting to see if I refresh this is a whole bunch of states in here. Not a whole bunch, there's 50, I guess. They might have some of the, yeah, they have some of the territories, but now we've successfully pulled information out of an API, this COVID-19 API, and inserted it into Salesforce. There's a couple things that we're going to need to worry about if you haven't noticed. One, we have a duplicate here. So one of the processes, probably not in this stream, but maybe the next one, we're going to need to work on basically updating the values if it exists, and not updating if it, updating if it exists, and then inserting if it does not exist, which is why you see here I've done this upsert DML option, because it will insert if we do not have the ID, and update if we have the ID out of it. And then, but we won't worry about that one for right now. Let's go ahead and continue to update the information that we're getting back and putting inside of our COVID state. So we've got to do, let's start from the top. Let's do positive, bring this over so I can see my Postman fields so I can remember them. Temp state, positive, and this is going to equal state.get, and it is called positive. And once again, if we run this, we're going to get another conversion error, because, or we're even seeing it here, that an object is not a decimal. And the same thing, we have to do a cast. I'm not going to cast this into a decimal because we would get decimal points. I'm going to cast this into an integer and see if it'll take it. There you go. So we are allowed to cast into integers that go into decimal values. And all the number fields, custom number fields inside of Salesforce are decimals. Fairly certain all of them are, because you can change them around and use have commas and decimal places for them. But if you want a value to not have decimal points, you can either cast it to an integer, or it's pretty much just cast it to an integer and you won't have decimal points. There's probably other ways of doing that. Cool. Let's start taking some of the other fields. So if we have positive, I'm assuming we have negative. And let's take the negative value. Where is it? The key value. And if you're still kind of wondering, where am I getting these key? Well, how do I know these things? This is the key. It's come back from the message that they're being sent, and here's the value that spits out of it. So positive is the key, and we get 300 as it's a number. It's when we talk about programming, this is an integer because we don't want to allow for any decimal points in here, and that's why we're casting these to integers. So I'm going to go down the line, taking the rest of these. I think negative, hospitalized deaths, and recovered, and some of the other ones, and I'm going to just enter them in here. So let's go ahead with the next one. So I'm pretty sure we need to use hospitalized cumulative. Or did I want to use currently? I gotta remember, hold on. Let's go back to the object. Yeah, this is hospitalized currently. That's that. That's the actual field that we have. So let's use that key value pair. And let's go to the object manager, COVID states, and let's take all of these values. Since I'm not using an IDE, you know, all of the fields don't pop up all the time. Next up, we have, I think it's on ventilators currently. Let's make sure. Close that out. On ventilators currently, yeah. So update this, and then update this. And now, what's the next one we got? Got positive, let's take recovered. Pretty sure it's just recovered. Double check that in here. Where is it? Yeah, cool. And for the next one, let's do total tests. And then let's grab total tests results in the keys. So all of these right now are integers, and we will continue to, as we can see, they're numbers with no decimal places. So we're not going to have them as decimals or doubles. Positive, I think we have positive, recovered, on ventilators, negatives, deaths. Do we have deaths? We do not. We should leave that one out. Nobody wants to see deaths. We only want to see happy stuff here. And is there an S? Nope, it's just death. Okay, so we are going to save that and run this again in our execute anonymous, and what we are expecting once more is for another set of 50 to be created, because we're not saying to update this anywhere in our code. We're not saying to, hey, look at our existing states that we have and update them. Nowhere in the code we're doing that, so it's just going to create more states. But I want to at least showcase this running, so let's execute this. Looks like it went through. Go back into here. And bam, now we're starting to see a bunch with actual data. So that works out really well. But I'm going to be closing it out and ending it here. But what I want to do before I sign out is let's just delete all of the states that exist before we do this call out, so we can have one at least clean run as we go through. So I am going to teach you guys how to delete things using the Apex Anonymous. It's very dangerous to delete things this way, because especially if you're doing this in production, you will delete things in production. So if you delete the wrong thing, you can get it back in the recycle bin depending on what you're deleting. So just be very mindful if you're using this method. I'm going to do it because I am in a sandbox or in my playground org, and you know, all of this data is just test data. So I'm just selecting my IDs from my COVID-19, my COVID-19 states table. So I'm just going to select all of them and delete them. Then we're going to call our web service again and update them all and create them all over again. So let's do that. I have uncommitted work. Please roll back. What line did it say that was? Line 9. You know what it is? It's asking to do them it wants to do them in a separate transaction because I'm not doing a future call out. We'll get to future call outs in a moment. Or not today, but we'll get to future call outs and why we would want to do that. So I commented my delete out, and then now I'm going to call this again. Should work. There we go. And then if we look at our table, our object, we should only see a fresh set of data. We have 56 rows in here, and it's all of the data from our API request that we have in here. So we were able to grab all of the different information that lives inside of an HTTP request and put them inside of Salesforce. Now we can, run reports, do some additional magic. Like, let's see, who has the most positive cases. Easily, we can see that New York right in here just by doing some double filtering. I'm in Florida. Pretty sure if I go on this list and type in FL in caps, Florida is going to pop up and we can see where it is on the list. So now we start to have the power of Salesforce, or that data inside of Salesforce, which is really cool. And we can do all of our Salesforce magic around this. So this is just the starting point. We have a lot more to go in this. There's, we don't want to have to delete all of our COVID states every time. We want to make sure to be able to update them constantly, and this data is refreshed every day. It's not like a CSV where you set it in and you have to continue. Well, it's not like a static CSV that nobody updates. These are updated every day, so we're going to want to do some sort of process around that to update this every day. Also, some things that we need to look at is we don't want to come in here, hitting this button either. We want to wait to refresh this inside of Salesforce. So for like your admins or anybody like that that wanted to update these things, they could come in here and press a button and do an update. So lots of stuff to come on this one. I'm kind of excited about this little mini project that we're doing. Been wanting to do this for a little bit just to kind of keep in track of everything that's going on. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Walters954, and remember, I believe in you.